Walk into the arena and you see it immediately. Entire rows of empty seats. The kind of sight you don't expect. Certainly not in the postseason. Then you check your phone, open a ticket app, and there it is in black and white. WNBA playoff tickets starting at $6. Not a preseason scrimmage. Not a weekday exhibition. The playoffs. The climax of the season. $6 to get in the door. It's hard to overstate how jarring that number is. $6 is less than a fast casual lunch. It's less than what many pay to park their car outside the building. In some markets, it's less than a movie ticket. And this isn't just about the last row in the top corner. In several venues, lower bowl playoff seats have been available at prices you'd normally associate with a drive-through combo. Courtside seats, yes, courtside in the postseason, popping up around the $200 mark. That's the kind of price you might expect for a high school state final, not a professional playoff series. The contrast between expectation and reality feels impossible to ignore. The initial reaction from fans and observers has been disbelief. But the deeper you look, the more one explanation dominates the conversation across women's basketball. These are the visible consequences of the Indiana Fever's star guard being sidelined. Caitlin Clark is not in uniform. She isn't pulling up from the logo, she isn't firing cross-court lasers, she isn't filling highlight reels in real time. She's in sweats on the bench, and the moment she stepped out of the lineup, the tide that had powered the league's surge seemed to recede. This isn't an indictment of the game or the athletes. It's a reality check about demand, marketing, and how fragile momentum can be when it leans too heavily on a single figure. For months, league executives have talked about the playoff audience, expressed concern about television partners, and tracked the fluctuations in viewership game by game. Without Clark headlining, those worries have sharpened. Listed prices tell one story. Ratings tell another. The through line is unmistakable. The league's messaging in recent months has emphasized that women's basketball is broader than one star. Players have echoed the same perspective publicly. The WNBA isn't just one person. There are other standouts playing at an elite level. That's undeniably true. But the numbers since Clark went down have been punishing. Across several windows this season when she sat, ratings didn't just dip, they sank. Some broadcasts saw declines north of 50% compared to games she played in. A drop of more than 55% from one week to the next isn't a blip. It's a flashing signal about where casual viewers are focusing their attention. That makes $6 playoff tickets more than a surprising bargain. It makes them a referendum. It raises questions about the league's business model, about how the product is positioned, and about whether there's been enough investment in converting this surge of interest into long-term, star-agnostic fandom. The phenomenon has an obvious name at this point, the Caitlin Clark effect, and it's measurable. When she plays, arenas swell, merchandise flies, and television delivers record audiences. When she doesn't, the evidence suggests the interest is far harder to sustain. Think back to the stretch earlier this year when the Indiana Fever became the most in-demand ticket in women's basketball. Her games turned into traveling events. Fans flew cross-country to watch her warm up. Resale markets ran wild. Reports of 4- and 5-figure courtside prices weren't outliers. Opponents began shifting games into larger buildings, full NBA arenas, because their regular homes couldn't meet demand. The Washington Mystics moved a Fever game from a 4,200-seat venue to Capital One Arena. The Chicago Sky hosted at the United Center and drew more than 20,000. Indiana became not just a draw, but the draw. In city after city, the Fever eclipsed local NBA attendance headlines for a night. For a franchise that, in recent years, has lived mostly in the shadow of past glory, it was a transformation. That's why the current reality is so stark. In last year's first round, the cheapest ticket to see the Fever on the road in a comparable series reportedly cleared $100. This year, with Clark out, prices tumbled. In some listings, 2 seats in the lower bowl cost less than a single t-shirt from the team store. General admission hovered around the price of a sandwich. In more than one market, you could sit behind the basket, a few rows off the floor, for less than $200 in the playoffs. The timeline of how it unraveled for Indiana explains a lot. On September 4th, Clark publicly acknowledged the groin injury that had nagged her for weeks and announced she would be out for the remainder of the season. The response among Fever supporters was immediate and emotional. This is a team that, thanks to her, have become part of fans' routines. Weekend afternoons at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, road trips to nearby cities, evenings wrapped around tip-off times. When the team hosted a playoff game for the first time since 2016, it should have been a culminating celebration. Instead, the ticket sites told a sobering story. Seats that would have sold a month earlier in minutes lingered. Entire sections remained available. The atmosphere inside the building, always electric with her on the floor, struggled to reach the same charge. That disconnect traveled far beyond Indianapolis. The WNBA All-Star Game, typically a mid-season showcase that captures attention from casual viewers, saw viewership drop sharply without Clark available to headline. The reported decline, roughly 36%, wasn't just a number. It was confirmation that the league's biggest pop among non-core fans centered on one player's presence. Networks that recently trumpeted shattered ratings records for regular season fever games weren't reporting similar numbers without her in the lineup. The contrast cut straight to the heart of the league's ambitions. Put bluntly, women's basketball has spent the past year living through a kind of case study in star-driven economics. The WNBA's growth in 2024, by almost every measure the league tracks, was extraordinary. Attendance climbed by nearly 50% year over year. A record 54 games sold out. The average crowd jumped from roughly 6,600 to more than 9,000. In cities where attendance had been stubbornly flat for a decade, ticket offices suddenly couldn't keep up. On television, regular season broadcasts featuring Indiana drew audiences that rivaled and sometimes surpassed marquee men's sports windows in the summer. That isn't incremental progress. That's a breakout. But breakouts demand follow-through. Converting a wave of new attention into durable loyalty takes time, planning, and consistency. That's where the league's challenges have been laid bare. The foundation looks thinner than it should when one player's absence moves every metric. You could see it coming in the way officials handled contact against Clark during the season. Hard fouls, off-ball bumps, borderline hits that drew howls from fans and commentators. The point isn't to grant special treatment. It's to enforce the rules with enough consistency to keep the best players on the court and the product intact. Whether the officiating conversations should be part of this debate is up to the viewer, but the end result is not. The league's brightest spotlight dimmed precisely when the stage got biggest. The dollar signs tell the story as clearly as the box scores ever could. Ticket prices plunge without the main attraction. Ratings dive. Media coverage shifts. All of this has unfolded as the WNBA enters a pivotal stretch. Expansion on the way, collective bargaining questions looming, and a new long-term media rights deal expected to kick in by 2026. Corporate partners have lined up in ways the league has long hoped for. City leaders are vying for franchise bids. The roadmap looks promising on paper. But the sight of $6 playoff seats during a supposed golden era is the contradiction that can't be waved away. In fairness to the Indiana Fever, they did what any franchise would do when presented with a once-in-a-generation talent. They built around her. They shifted their offense to reflect her strengths. They made her the face of their ticketing, marketing, and game day experience. It worked. It worked beyond their most optimistic projections. But when someone is central to that extent, managing her health and workload becomes as important as any play drawn up in a huddle. The groin injury didn't arrive out of nowhere. The warnings were there in minutes played, in the physical toll visible night after night, in the escalating contact that became part of every scouting report. The debate over who ultimately made the call on her availability late in the year, team, player, medical staff, will continue. What matters now is what the franchise and the league learned. The conversation inevitably veers toward fairness when people ask why other stars don't seem to move numbers like Clark. That's missing the reality of how sports work. Fans attach themselves to personalities, stories, and signature styles. The WNBA is loaded with elite players, Aya Wilson dominating both ends, Breanna Stewart's versatility, Nafisa Collier's consistency, Kelsey Plum's scoring pops, Alyssa Thomas doing everything on a court at once. None of that is in question. But in the wider sports marketplace, singular figures sometimes cut through in a way that few others do. For this moment, Caitlin Clark has been that figure for women's basketball. You don't replace that overnight, and you don't manufacture it by committee. The face of a league is chosen by the public. That's why, in Indiana, the messaging about other contributions, Kelsey Mitchell's shot-making, Aaliyah Boston's control of the paint, Lexi Hull's timing and grit, has struggled to fill the gap. Those players deserve attention, and in a healthy system, they would be drawing more of it. But the market is efficient and blunt. It rewards what it recognizes and what it can't miss. For most casual viewers and many would-be ticket buyers, the Fever without Clark are a fundamentally different proposition. The attendance and viewership figures bear it out. There's a temptation in moments like these to scatter blame, to point at coaches, trainers, officials, marketing departments, even media partners, and declare a single culprit. Reality is more layered. The league has to balance competitive integrity with entertainment value. Teams have to manage minutes and matchups in a season that, at times, demands too much travel and too little rest. Broadcasters chase the audiences that keep lights on. Everyone is operating within constraints. But the image of playoff tickets at single-digit prices is the kind of optics problem that forces an industry to recalibrate. It says, out loud and in public, that the WNBA's spectacular 2024 gains are fragile if they rest on just one pillar. If you zoom out, this is not unprecedented in sports. Golf evolved through the same reckoning as Tiger Woods dealt with injury and absence. Tennis has faced similar resets after eras anchored by a few titans. The NFL, NBA, and MLB have each seen local markets crash back to earth when a generational player departs or sits. The difference here is scale and timing. The WNBA surge is new, the stakes are rising, and the league is in the middle of setting the terms for its next decade. Seeing playoff seats advertised for what you might spend at a convenience store is more than a temporary embarrassment. It's a warning about the brittleness of growth that depends so heavily on one superstar's availability. None of this diminishes what the Indiana Fever have achieved on the court this season. They did not fold under the weight of expectations. They did not let early season turbulence define them. For stretches, they played with a cohesion and toughness that resonated well beyond their market. But the acute shock of Clark's absence is undeniable. Fans who built their summer plans around her games voted with their wallets. Many stayed home. Many tuned in to something else. Some postponed their trip to Gainbridge Fieldhouse for a later date. In a world where teams carefully manage conversion funnels and fan journeys, the most basic metric, buying a ticket, told an unvarnished truth. It's worth stating what should be obvious but gets lost in the noise. The answer to this problem is not to anoint a new face by decree or to talk down the players who aren't filling the same void. The answer is to build resilience into the system. That means safeguarding stars on the court. It means improving officiating consistency so that hard fouls get handled and skill can shine. It means investing in storytelling that elevates multiple teams and personalities all season long, not just when one team comes to town. It means making sure the schedule helps more than it hurts, cutting down on brutal travel stretches that lead to fatigue and injury. It means continuing to leverage expansion so that new fan bases connect to franchises not just because of a single visiting player, but because they see themselves in the team they host 20 nights a year.